Hello my beautiful people. Do you guys enjoy these long videos? Also I'm so happy to be making some SEROROKI content. They are one of my favorite ships. So enjoy this beautiful rare pair. As the elevator door opened, Sarah's tape wrapped around a small pot plant, stopping it just in time as it almost met Todoroki's face. Bakugo. Kachin. Kirishima's and Izuku's voices were heard yelling at the angry-looking blonde. Bakugo scowled at the three boys looking at him before making his way back upstairs. Hey, Roki, sorry about that. Midoriya told Bakugo his cooking was too spicy. Sero spoke, scratching the back of his head. Deku made his way back to the dining table with his other classmates. Todoroki began walking towards Sero, giving him a small smile. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. Sero managed to get out before Todoroki walked off towards the table. Here Todoroki. Here, I saved you a bowl. Oh, thank you Mina. Todoroki grabbed the bowl of food sitting next to Deku and an empty chair. Sero walked around the table grabbing his bowl from where he was sitting, sliding it across the table in front of the empty space next to Todoroki. As he sat down he rested his elbows on the table, his face falling in his hand as he watched Todoroki eat his food. He watched the way Todoroki's face flushed a light shade of pink, assuming the food was a tad spicy, yet his face still stuttered as his outlined jaw moved chewing his food. Hey lover boy, tape dispensers off the table. Mina called from across the table. Sero immediately removed his arms from the table, looking at Mina frantically as if she had caught him doing something illegal. Lo love B. Oh calm down, I'm only playing. She winked, letting out a little giggle as she went back to eating her food and joining in on the conversation. Sero cleared his throat, playing with the bowl of food with his hashi. He turned his gaze once again looking at Todoroki. Hey Roki, did you want to come to my room and read some of those new mangas later today? Todoroki put his bowl of food down on the table, turning his attention to Sero. Sure. Awesome. A moment of silence between the boys as they stared at each other. The noises of their friends blurred out as they continued to stare. Are you two okay? Aida interrupted the two as he stood behind them, placing a hand on both their shoulders. Todoroki slightly flinching at the sudden touch. Sero stood up smiling at Aida, starting small conversation as he removed Aida's hand off Todoroki's shoulder. It went unnoticed as Aida continued to babble on. A few hours go by. Sero was sitting on the couch in the common room, his gaze lost in the television show that he wasn't paying much attention to. Mina's head rested in his lap as she scrolled through her phone. Hey Sero. What's up with you and Roki? She mockingly spoke Todoroki's nickname. What do you mean? He spoke, looking down at her as she moved the phone away from her face. Well, I mean you two have gotten closer since the beginning of the year, so I just want to know. She shrugged, watching as Sero blushed looking back at the TV. We're friends I guess. You guess? Yeah, man stop crying. He said, lightly pushing her. She stumbled onto the floor. A few seconds go by. She still laid on the floor face down. She began to dramatically roll around. Sero, I think you broke my arm. She whined, looking at him, trying to hide a smile. He shook his head, trying not to laugh at the scene she was making. Mina, are you okay? A quiet voice came from beside the couch. There stood Todoroki, looking static as ever. Man, he's hard to read. Oh haha, yeah, I'm fine. Just joking around. Mina laughed, getting up from the floor. As she sat on the couch, putting space between her and Sero this time, she patted the empty space in between the two, gesturing for Todoroki to sit. In response he did. His leg brushed against Sero's. He awkwardly crossed his legs, avoiding the physical contact. It would make Sero feel weird, right? Hey Roki. Hi Sero. S. Before Mina could say what she was about to, loud footsteps boomed through the first floor. Todoroki's legs uncrossed as all three of them were startled by the loudness of their roommates. their legs once again brushing against each other's. As Todoroki moved more next to Mina, Sero placed a hand on Todoroki's thigh to stop him. Mina, too distracted, asking Kirishima what was going on, so she didn't notice the way Sero leant into Todoroki's ear, so he could hear him over his loud classmates. "You don't have to move, I don't mind." "Oh." Sero smiled at Todoroki, turning his head towards his friends who were way too energetic about something. Todoroki felt an unfamiliar warmness spread across his face as he let his leg relax his neck to Sero's bare thigh. "Why is everyone being so goddamn loud?" "Race, we're having a dorm race with Class 1B." Kirishima excitedly yelled out. "Wait, really? It's the weekend and I insist on resting but nobody is listening per usual. Are you three going to join?" Aida spoke formally. Mina nodded and Todoroki shrugged. "Yeah, sure, I'm always up for some competition. I'm going to leave all you extras in the dust." Kachin. "We're not racing out classmates. We are racing class." "I know, Deku." "Alright, what are we waiting for? Let's go." Mina jumped over the couch, running off with everyone outside. The two boys stayed seated on the couch as if they couldn't move. "We should probably get out there." Sero spoke, looking down at their legs, Todoroki doing the same. "Yeah, we should." They stayed looking at each other for a few seconds before Sero spoke again. "You know you don't have to feel uncomfortable around me, Roki." "I know. I don't feel uncomfortable around you. I feel the complete opposite, Sero." "Ah, really?" "Yes. Now we should probably get to the race." "Why, yeah." Sero stood up with Todoroki both leaving the room. They walked outside, joining their classmates on the field. The races have already started. Everyone was using their quirks in some sort of race. Todoroki sat down next to Midoriya. Bakugou and Kirishima were sitting next to a mumbling Deku writing in his notes book. Sero sat on the other side next to Kirishima and Mina. "Deku, quite the mumbling." Sorry Kachin, it's just everyone's quirks have improved so much." Deku basically squealed in excitement. "I don't care." "Sure you don't, buddy." "What's that supposed to mean, huh?" "Nothing, Bakubro, nothing." Sero started picking the grass in front of him before he was pulled away from his thoughts. "What's got you all quiet? Or should I say who? Can a man just think in quietness?" Sero accused jokingly. "Haha, no." "Oh, hush it. Just ask him on a date, Sero." Mina spoke, getting up from the ground to line up with the others, leaving Sero's mouth slightly open. A half an hour goes by and almost everyone has participated in every little activity. Sero and Todoroki stood next to each other and a few students from 1B and other classes also began to gather next to them. As the small optical course started, everyone was using their quirks to get to the finish line. Sounds of cheering and people grunting as they hit the ground getting left behind soon got even louder as the finish line beard. Sero looked back, seeing Mama's hand inches away from Todoroki's shoulder. He used his quirk, pulling the boy to his body, using his other arm dispensing tape to the finish line, slingshotting them closer. Just as they pass the line they fall. A heavy thud as they land on the ground, rolling to a stop. Todoroki looked up from his hands and knees, seeing Sero laying on his back, arms wrapped around his stomach, laughing. As the boy turned over, Sero's eyes locked with Todoroki still laughing. Todoroki couldn't help it. He let out a small giggle, his face flushing a pink as he laid on his back next to Sero. "Ah man, that was good." Sero rolled over, looking at Todoroki's smiling face. How strands of his red hair had been ruffled into mixing with the white. How the sweat on his body glistened under the sun. "Wow. What is it?" Todoroki asked, a small smile still painted on his face. "You should smile more, Roki. You look really pretty." Todoroki tried hiding his smile, averting his gaze and now flustered face. Sero giggled at his reaction. Todoroki looked back over to Sero. He let a small smile paint his lips. Sero smiled back at him, allowing his face to flush red. "Whoa, you guys, that was so cool. That was a manly rescue, dude." Their friends cheered, running over to the two, pulling them up from the ground. Man, that was fun. Sero spoke, walking out of his bathroom, towel hugged around his waist. His hair dripped water over his shoulders and toned body. He plopped down on his bed, laying on his back, his bed getting water soaked into the covers, but that was the least of his thoughts. Todoroki has only been in my room, like 3 times, and it was only for a few seconds. Oh my god, he's gonna sit on my bed. His thoughts filled his mind like the red blush spreading across his cheeks. Sue Todoroki. What time is your date? Date? With Sero. He looked at the grinning girl, raising an eyebrow, thinking for a minute. ID date? Yeah bro, I mean you two totally dig each other, but if we got that wrong, just act like we never said anything. Kirishima sat up from the ground, raising his hands in a gesture of defense. Did? Todoroki asked, curiosity in his voice. Kirishima opened his mouth to speak, but Mina shut him down by throwing a cushion at his face. Interested in, like in a romance way. She spoke, hesitant of her own words. Everyone stared intensely, waiting for Todoroki's answer. Oh. Todoroki pulled out his phone and began typing. Everyone was still looking at him as if he was about to speak more on the matter. Hello Sero. Hey Roki, you okay? Yes, when is our date? Sero flew up from his lying position, his hair ruffling into his face as he pushed it out of the way to read Todoroki's text again. He looked down, reading the word date over again, trying to decipher if it was a mistake. Date? He nervously typed, biting his nail, waiting for a response. If you would like to call it that. The other said if we dig each other it should be a date. Todoroki raised his eyebrow, typing out the sentence. Oh really? I mean yeah, cool. Okay, see you in 10? Yeah, that's cool. Ah man. Sero kicked his now dry towel off his body before opening his closet, pulling out clothes. You okay Todoroki? MMO yeah. He smiled at the group. So? What? What did Sero say? He said cool, to the date. Or, cute. They all gathered around Todoroki, asking him questions. Meanwhile, Sero upstairs in his room was freaking out over what to wear. I mean, we're not going out, so, sweats. He grabbed a black pair of sweats out of his closet, throwing them on. He looked in his mirror, fixing up his hair and spraying some cologne. Before he could do anything else, a knock at his door echoed through his room, his head wiping in the door's view. Coming. He pulled open the door to see Todoroki standing there with a small bag. Roki, hey. Sero smiled at Todoroki, whose face almost instantly turned red. His gaze was nowhere caught in Seros, but rather his shirtless torso. Shirt. Right, sorry. No. You have a nice body. Todoroki blurted out, only to be taken back by his own words, his face turning even redder than it was before. Sero moved aside, letting Todoroki step into his room. He closed the door and walked over to his desk. He grabbed a lighter, taking it to a few incense. He blew the flame, watching the scented smoke fill the room. Todoroki sat at the end of Sero's bed, watching him as the pinks and orange hues spread across the walls, and a golden tinge hitting the side of Sero's shirtless torso. His hair moving with him as he moved, watching the ash fall onto the catcher. He turned his attention to Todoroki, who almost immediately looked away. Sero smiled. What you got in there? Sweets. Cool. Sero crawled on his bed, leaning against the cold wall, watching as Todoroki just sat there fiddling with his hands. Roki, come sit next to me. Todoroki crawled onto the bed, sitting in front of Sero, crossing his legs. He turned back, grabbing the bag of sweets before pulling one out. He unwrapped it and handed it to Sero, who happily opened his mouth. Todoroki placed the sweet on Sero's tongue, his fingers lightly brushing his lips as he pulled away. Sero closed his eyes and mouth, humming in approval. Todoroki blushed at the way Sero's eyebrows furrowed together, enjoying the sweet. Is it good? Yeah, great. You want one? It's fine, I can't. Sero unwrapped a powdered sweet, holding it in front of Todoroki's mouth. He opened it, letting the sweet fall on his taste buds. He chewed, nodding in approval. Sero smiled, watching the boy enjoy the sugary treats. Just before Todoroki reached for another, Sir grabbed Todoroki's chin, gently turning his gaze back to his. They didn't say a word as Sero's thumb brushed over the corner of Todoroki's mouth, his thumb dragging across his bottom lip lightly. He brought his thumb to his own mouth, tasting the sweet powder. You had some powdered sugar. Thanks. So, what ones did you want to read? Sero grabbed a few manga volumes off his headboard, placing them in front of Todoroki. Oh, anyone you want to start with is fine. I don't mind. Sweet. I'm not going to lie, I did read the first few pages of this. Todoroki let out a little giggle. Like always. Sero blushed at the heavenly sound that he rarely heard. Hey Roki? Are you ticklish? I don't know. I don't think anyone has ever tickled me. Why? Really? Yes. Sero leant forward, holding eye contact with Todoroki. As he leant forward slightly, his fingers brushing over Todoroki's foot, he flinched, letting out a little huff. Sero raised his eyebrow, a smirk washing over his lips. Todoroki threw his head back, a laugh emitting from his mouth as Sero's fingers began attacking at his sides. Sero stopped looking at Todoroki, who had tears in the corners of his eyes. He was giggling, a smile painted his face as he calmed down. Wow, you seriously have a beautiful laugh. I don't think I do. Really? Well, I guess I will just have to tickle you until you can hear it for yourself. Before Todoroki could try and escape, Sero basically pounced on the boy, attacking his body playfully with his hands. Todoroki squirmed under Sero, his face flushing red. Sero began giggling at his own actions. Han to street stop. Todoroki giggled out. Sero stopped, watching Todoroki's chest rise and fall. Almost out of breath, he threw his arm over his face, still giggling, all while under Sero. No more. Seriously, I think I might stop breathing. Todoroki smiled up at Sero. Sero laughed. Is that really a good reason to stop though? Todoroki grabbed Sero's hand, stopping him from tickling him. Sero weighed himself above Todoroki on one arm. Todoroki let go of his hand, it went back right next to the side of his head. Alright. Sero spoke in defeat, not moving. The sunset, orange and golden hues now filled the room completely. Your scar? What? Todoroki frowned in curiosity as to why Sero would point it out. He placed a hand over it, blushing. Sero's hand gently moved it away, looking at the boy's face, admiring every small detail about it. Sero giggled. I think it's beautiful, and you look really handsome and badass. I could go on. I've always wanted to tell you that, just so you know. Says Sero. Ivan. Todoroki stuttered words, not knowing how to process the compliment. Sero leant down, placing a kiss above Todoroki's left eyebrow. Sero blushed at his own action when he lifted his head. Todoroki looked as if he was about to get a nosebleed. Todoroki pushed himself up, leaning on his elbow, causing his face to rest closer to Sero's. Sero leant back a bit, sitting on his knees on either side of Todoroki. Roki. Why yeah. Can I? Todoroki's eyes widened, his face flushing even more red. If that was even possible, his whole body felt on fire as he nodded, not really thinking. As his body taking over his actions, he felt Sero's lips connect with his. They settled there for a moment, not moving, just pushing their lips together. Sero pulled away, looking into Todoroki's eyes, and smiled at the way Todoroki was blushing. He leant back in, placing a kiss on the corner of his lips, smiling softly at the way Todoroki nudged into the touch. Sero's lips meet Todoroki's again, Sero biting ever so gently at Todoroki, who quietly inhaled sharply. A small hiss noise in response. Sero grabbed Todoroki's waist, falling back against the wall, his head and back causing a loud thud to echo through the walls. Todoroki gasped in response, only to be silenced by Sero's lips. It was a sloppy kiss, until they found their rhythm. Sero's hands soon moving on their own, gripping at Todoroki's lower waist, pulling him in closer. Todoroki's tongue found its way into Sero's mouth. Sero broke away for a second, catching a glimpse of Todoroki's discomposed expression. God, he looked perfect. Just as Sero leant back in to continue, his gaze was averted to Todoroki's refined collarbone. Once again acting before thinking, he found his lips leaving butterfly kisses from his jaw and just below his collarbone. Todoroki's thoughts were blurry yet so aware he threw his head back, allowing Sero to bombard his neck with rougher kisses. The more Todoroki began to think about every moment Sero's body felt like against his, the easier it was becoming for him to let go and melt deeper into his touch. His fingers tangled into Sero's hair, pulling gently, earning a gentle nip at his skin. Once again Todoroki began to fall deeper in the pool of electric sparks. Before he knew it, he needed to say Sero's name as if it was an unknown instinct. He let his lips part, letting his voice out. To his no surprise, it wasn't his usual voice. The name broke off his lips as a whimpered moan. Sero's heart started to pound even harder in his chest. Everything became more vivid as the divine noise tingled in his ears, sending a wave of tightness through his abdomen. Todoroki pulled away, still sitting on Sero's lap. Todoroki surveying how Sero's hair was slightly a mess, small strands falling over his face. His chest heaving, a light sweat unfurled over his skin. He covered his mouth. Sero tilted his head to the side, a small smug smile awoke on his face. That was, wow. Hot. Todoroki didn't know how to respond, so he let out a soft giggle. He leant his head on Sero's shoulder. Sero leant back against the wall, Todoroki snuggling into him. Todoroki let his legs wrap around Sero like a koala bear. Sero relaxed at how warm Todoroki felt and how they could have this all the time. Before Sero could think anymore, he felt a soft pair of lips kissing at his shoulder. He let Todoroki's kisses trail up to his neck. He felt Todoroki hesitate and Sero let his hand rub at Todoroki's inner thigh. Todoroki shuddered at the touch, letting out a huffed breath, Sero's eyes rolling back, seeing stars at the feeling of Todoroki's hot breath against his neck. Something he had never felt before. He wanted to stop Todoroki before a familiar feeling began to approach, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Todoroki began biting gently at his skin. Sero got goosebumps as he felt his tongue lick and kiss at the area he had lightly bit. He moved up Sero's neck, tilting his head, getting better access. Sero leant his head up against the wall. Todoroki began attacking the same area. His hands rested on Sero's abs, moving to his waist, his hands traveling up, feeling out the toned area. Sero bit down on his bottom lip. It felt like his eyes were about to water. The sensation felt too good. His grip on Todoroki's thigh tightening slightly, causing Todoroki to jerk forward. Fuck Roki. His words spilled out as a throaty gasp. He lightly rolled his lower body up against Todoroki, earning a light gasp from Roki, who lifted his head from Sero's neck. His eyes were heavy-lidded, panting and flushed face. Todoroki wrapped his arms around Sero's neck. Sero's hands immediately slithered up under the back of Todoroki's shirt. Sero began leaving kisses all over Todoroki's collarbone. The more Sero rubbed Todoroki's back, the more he pushed forward into him. Sero pushed Roki back slightly, pulling his shirt from his back over his head swiftly. He took a second admiring Todoroki's well-toned torso. He's always admired Roki's build, but having him in his lap, hearing the small noises escaping from his lips in his ear, all while his toned body so close to his, was something different. Their lips meeting. This time they keep it slow, their lips moving with each other's, smooching noises filling the room, along with out-of-breath huffs. The steadiness allows them to catch up with their thoughts. The pull away, keeping eye contact. Sero's eyes moved to Todoroki's body, his hand lightly trailing down to his sharp V-line. Todoroki shuddered at Sero's fingers tracing around the toned outlines. Sero leaned into Todoroki's body, kissing his bare chest, his hands trailing back to Todoroki's lower back. His mouth trailed deadly close to those rosy red buds. He looked up to see Todoroki's eyes glued to him, his lips slightly parted. His dazed look sent sparks through his body. He smiled, keeping his eyes on Todoroki, awaiting to see his reaction as his tongue brushed across his nipple. Todoroki bit his lip, his eyes squeezing shut, a small whimper escaping his mouth. Sero almost melted right then and there. He felt Todoroki's fingers grip at the back of his hair, causing a low grunt from his throat. He began attacking at both buds. Todoroki began letting out noises he didn't even know he could make. Feeling embarrassed, he took a hand that was resting on Sero's shoulder, leaving the other wrapped in Sero's hair. He covered his mouth. Tears began to form on his eyelashes. This feeling for both of them was so foreign yet so addicting. Roki. Sero spoke just below a whisper, grabbing Todoroki's wrist, pulling it away from his mouth. He put his focus back on the sensitive area. He lightly bit at it. Hunter. This wasn't as quiet as the sounds he was letting out before. Holy fuck. Sero scoffed out in disbelief. Hey, are you guys okay? The door swung open. Kirishima froze in his place, his mouth hanging open. Sero and Roki's eyes shot to the door as Mina looked up from her phone, taking a moment to register what her eyes were seeing. Kirishima slammed the door. Oh my god. Mina's scream was heard from the other side of the door. It was silent for a few seconds. Sero was the first one to break the uncomfortable silence. Well, that happened. They both looked at the door and back at each other. Todoroki fell against Sero's shoulder, face flushing redder. Sero patted his back lightly. I would say, it's going to be okay, but Mina isn't going to let this go. He awkwardly laughed out. Todoroki sighed, rolling off Sero and falling back on the bed, his hands covering his face. Sero laid next to him. It's probably a good thing we got interrupted. He nervously laughed. Todoroki turned his head, raising an eyebrow. I was starting to get hard. Todoroki giggled, his face turning even redder. He shook his head, looking back at Sero. Me too. Have you done that before? No. You seemed to know what you were doing. Have you? God no. They both let out a laugh, as they are on the bed enjoying the comfortable silence.